We're going to be starting on page 54 this evening, continuing in the real cause of global warming. Okay, so we're going to start in the article in the middle of page 54 where it says World Science Monthly, February 1956. Okay, and so remember, as we're continuing to cover the global warming, or the real cause of global warming, continue to remember, what Pastor's been teaching us all of these years concerning the microorganisms and how they operate, how they work. Remember where we got this knowledge from, and think about how far ahead we are of science with all of their technology and their laboratories and microscopes and things like that. We're able to answer and to conversate about these things that they're just now starting to discover, with man's understanding. So consider these things as we go through some of these articles. So here in this article, it says that the problem was solved in 1881 and again in 1904 when it was shown that extrapolations must be made for solar radiation of different wavelengths to determine what the intensity of each would be if there were no intervening air, and the values for small wavelengths must then be summed. So we'll get into this, but what they're saying is that they have to start plugging in numbers and different data to try to figure out what's going to take place, with radiation and different things like that if there was like no firmament. They're trying to figure out how the earth works is what they're doing. How does life work? So it says a value of 1.96 calories per square centimeter per meter was obtained for the solar constant, or the flux of total radiation received outside the Earth's atmosphere per unit area at mean Earth-Sun distance, that only recently has been improved by observation from balloons and high-flying aircrafts. Early estimates of the sun's temperature range from 1,461 degrees Celsius, which is 2,660 degrees Fahrenheit, to 10 million degrees Celsius to 18 million degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so here's some of the guesses here. So with man's technology, they figure that, well, the sun's temperature is anywhere between 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit to 18 million degrees Fahrenheit. That's a lot. They really don't know. Okay, well, 2,600 to 18 million. The temperature of the sun is somewhere in there. This was their best guess. Then it says, transforming the solar constant into the energy radiated by the sun and thence into its effective temperature was impossible until the law that connects the temperature of the surface with the amount of heat radiated per second, the Stefan-Boltzmann law, was established about 1880. Also, once this man established the law, then they were able to understand certain things about how life works, right? 1880. Okay, Yahweh's law was established way before 1880. Okay, the scriptures were written way before 1880. Okay, so think about this information. I mean, you have certain prophets writing about how the earth is suspended upon nothing, how the waters can't go past a certain boundary, how the earth was made by Yahweh before 1880. Okay, but they're saying here that they started to understand these things because of this area of Yahweh's law that he understood, but they call it the Stefan-Boltzmann's law. Okay, Stefan-Boltzmann. Okay, so it says here that the moon with its opaque disk of almost exactly the same apparent size as the sun and with a sharply defined edge has been valuable to the solar astronomer at times of solar eclipses. In the Middle Ages, prominences on the sun that became visible during eclipses were thought to be part of the moon's atmosphere, mirages, clouds, or holes in the moon. During an eclipse of July 1860, which crossed Spain, prominences were successfully photographed, and by observing the motion of the moon across them, it was demonstrated that these were solar. During an eclipse of August 1868, observers in India and in England, struck by the brilliance of the prominences, independently showed that they might be seen in broad daylight simply by opening the split of a spectroscope and aiming it just outside the brilliant disk of the sun's photosphere. The invention, 1930, Y'all see that year there? 1930. What took place in 1934? Right, the birth of the witness, right? In this time period. So here's another increase in technology in this time period. So let's see what took place in this time period. So the invention in 1930 of the coronagraph made it possible for the first time to study the corona without an eclipse from high altitude stations and on a nearly continuous basis. So in 1930 they made this coronagraph that made it possible to start studying the sun. Okay, as technology increased. Now that was spoken of by the prophet, right? In these last days, in this generation, technology will increase, knowledge will increase. With a modified instrument, the K coronometer 1950, which used photoelectric detection, it became possible to view the corona through hazy skies at sea level, and measurements at very clear sites were greatly extended to large distances from the limb of the sun. So the mysterious coronal spectrum, at first attributed to the mythical element coronium, was discovered in 1941 to be made up of the so-called forbidden lines of highly ionized atoms of iron, nickel, and other elements. The lines are described as forbidden because they are almost impossible to produce in a laboratory. Okay, so looking at that, it says that they're almost impossible to produce in a laboratory. But whose laboratory are they almost impossible for? Man's laboratory. But whose laboratory is it not impossible for? Yahweh's, right? Oh, Yahweh has a laboratory? Where is that in the scriptures? All right, so the apostle said that with Yahweh, everything is possible, right? With Yahweh, everything is possible. Let's look at Jeremiah 32 for a second here. Jeremiah chapter 32. Now, in those specific scriptures, when it says that with Yahweh all things are possible, the first couple scriptures above it, the first few above it, it's talking about salvation. They were saying, well, who can be saved? Then the scripture says with men it is impossible, but with Yahweh all things are possible. Okay, but the key there says with Yahweh all things are possible. It's not just speaking about salvation only. Yahweh can do anything. Okay, so let's look at Jeremiah 32, which is found on page 600. And let's look at verse 17. It says, Yahweh Father, behold, you have made the heavens and the earth. By your mighty power and outstretched arm, nothing is too great for you. Okay, nothing is too great for you. Now look at verse 27. Okay, 32 verse 27. Behold, I am Yahweh, the creator of all flesh. Is there anything too hard for me? Okay, is there anything too hard for Yahweh? No. Okay, with Yahweh, all things are possible. But when Yahweh does something, he's going to do it in wisdom. Okay, he's going to do it in wisdom. He's not going to do something that's going to, bring forth death. And this is what we have to understand. And this is why Yahweh says, keep my Sabbath, meet with me so I can show you how to take care of things. Okay, so it's important because mankind has rejected this great knowledge of Yahweh, and they're trying to figure out how Yahweh works. But they don't know how Yahweh works. They can't see Yahweh in the things that he does. Okay, but only we can see Yahweh in these things because we put our trust and we believe in Yahweh. Okay, so when we're looking at these things, it's very important to understand that without trusting and believing in Yahweh, we're going to be just as clueless as the scientists. Okay, clueless as the scientists. Right now, we're more intelligent than the scientists, Yahweh's way. Remember, the wisdom of Yahweh is foolishness to man. Okay, but the ways of man is foolishness to Yahweh. So let's continue here. It says, radio waves from the sun were first detected in 1942 on British radar sets. It was suggested that the burst of radio energy were associated with an active sunspot visible on the surface of the sun, and in particular with the large solar flare of February 28. In the same year, a weak background radio emission of noise was detected from the quiet sun. The sun observed when sunspots and related phenomena are at a minimum. The science of radio astronomy has become a large and important field of solar research. Okay, solar research. So again, they're searching. This is what research is. They're looking to try to understand how Yahweh does things. Let's take a look at Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3. I'm going to do just a little bit of reading here for a second. Okay, because again, the book of Yahweh is the source of what? All knowledge, right? The book of Yahweh is the source of all knowledge. And this is what Yahweh says in Proverbs chapter 3, starting at verse 19. Yahweh by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding he established the heavens. Through his knowledge, the depths are broken up and the skies distill the dew. Okay, so wisdom. This wisdom with Yahweh. So look over to chapter 8. Proverbs chapter 8. Starting at verse 1, it says, does not wisdom cry out? Does not understanding raise her voice? She stands on the top of the heights beside the way where the paths meet. She cries out by the gates to the entry of the city at the entrance of the doors, proclaiming to you, O men, I call out, and my plea is directed to all mankind. Okay, so think about this for a second. Okay, because again, letting Scripture interpret Scripture, line upon line, precept upon precept, it's a lot of information in here. Looking at verse 3, it says she cries out by the gates to the entry of the city at the entrance of the doors. That's almost written exactly like Genesis 28:16, right? Y'all know what that scripture says? Let's find out. Genesis 28:16. And this is where wisdom cries out at. It says, then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely Yahweh is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how wonderful is this place? This is none other than the house of Yahweh, and this is the gate, the entrance, the way to the kingdom of Yahweh. Okay, so let's read Proverbs 8:3 again. She cries out by the gates to the entry of the city at the entrance of the doors. Wisdom only comes from Yahweh's house. This is the only place where Yahweh is going to bring forth the knowledge of life. Okay, only at his house. Praise Yahweh. So this wisdom comes from Yahweh, from his house. Okay, so, without this understanding, reading this scripture, she cries out at the gates to the entry of the city, at the entrance of the doors. We'll be thinking about some guy on a soapbox, screaming out the end is near and all of this, right? Because that's how the world depicts this wisdom. Here's a guy that's proclaiming the Bible, but that's not what Yahweh is saying here. You have to go to the house of Yahweh for this understanding. Okay, and now you have to add all of the other scriptures with that. Deuteronomy 12:5 and so on and so forth. Amos 3:7. All of these scriptures that show you where to go to get this wisdom. Continuing on here, verse 22, Proverbs 8:22. Yahweh possessed me wisdom at the beginning, the very first of his way, before any of his acts of old. I, wisdom, was brought into being before the beginning, before the world was created, at the very first, before there was ever an earth. I, wisdom, was given birth when there were no depths, when there were no foundations abounding with water. I, wisdom, was born before the mountains and the hills were settled. Before Yahweh made the earth, or fields, or any of the dust of the world, I, wisdom, was with him. When he prepared the heavens, I, wisdom, was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he established the clouds above and securely fixed the foundations of the deep. When he gave the sea his decree that the water should not pass the bounds he commanded. When he marked out the foundation of the earth, then I, wisdom, was beside him as one brought up with him. I was daily his delight, rejoicing constantly in his presence, rejoicing in the inhabited earth, and delighting in the sons of men. So he's showing you this is where Yahweh found his joy in life. Okay, only through the keeping of his laws is there joy, is there peace and abundant living. And he's saying here, look, this is what I find joy in. An inhabited earth, a healthy, healthy people, a healthy planet. All of these things bring me joy. Okay, and this wisdom, this understanding only comes from these teachings. Okay, without these laws, there's no way to truly govern life, to have life. So now listen to me, wisdom, my children, for blessed are those who observe my ways. Listen to instruction and be wise. Do not reject it. Blessed is the man who listens to me, wisdom, watching daily at my gates. And these gates are where? The house of Yahweh. This is the gateway, the entrance way to the kingdom. Okay, watching daily at my house, we can say that. Waiting at the post of my doors. For whoever finds me, wisdom, finds life and obtains honor from Yahweh. Hold your place right there. Let's turn back to Proverbs 3 for 1 second, just one page back. And look at what we just read here. It says, for whoever finds me, wisdom, finds life and obtains honor from Yahweh. Obtains, okay, it means you get it. Over time, you get it. But look at Proverbs 3:18 at the very top there. She is a tree of life to those who embrace her, wisdom. Blessed are they who hold fast to her. Okay, you see how Yahweh showing you the tree of life also? This wisdom, this tree of life, the house of Yahweh. All right, we understand that, right? This is not a new teaching. This is not a new understanding. But when we're reading and we're going through Pastor's teachings, Pastor always tell us, you know, when you read one scripture, we should be thinking about what? Another scripture. All right, here a little, there a little, line upon line, precept upon precept. And look at the last verse here, verse 36. It says, but he who sins against me, wronging me, wisdom, only harms himself. All those who hate me love death. Okay, so if you're not partaking in this wisdom of Yahweh, then you love death. Okay, you love death because that's the only thing that comes from not keeping the laws of Yahweh. Death. So here, going back into the book here, page 54, the firmament was made for man and created perfectly. Okay, it was created perfectly. We know one thing for sure. The firmament is a creation of a huge amount of pure, transparent micro-kingdoms. It's an expanse that envelops the globe, governing, allowing or not allowing what enters or comes to mankind from outside the firmament. There are many kingdoms, all micro-kingdoms, that make up the firmament that was made by Yahweh on the second day of creation. This is shown in Genesis 1:6. And Yahweh said, let there be an expanse between the waters, and let there be separation between waters from the waters. Okay, now this was done on the second day. Now, as we continue to go through this, think about how smart, how much wisdom you have to strategically, systematically, mathematically, however you want to say it, create things that's going to sustain the what we call life. Okay, because if Yahweh would have left out one thing here, if the earth would have been tilted at this degree here, or this far away from the sun, or this close to the sun, life couldn't exist. Okay, everything that Yahweh has done for us and still is doing for us is the reason why we have life. Okay, and so we need to be thankful to Yahweh and continue to learn how to take care of life instead of going against Yahweh and just trying to figure out how things work. Because even if we're going to see that they're learning some things, but they're still not learning the truth. Remember what the scripture says, forever searching, but what? Never coming to the full knowledge of the truth. All right, searching, test tubes, experiments. Oh, well, this is how this works. But yet, they'll still go out and sin because they don't know the laws of Yahweh. They don't know what really causes, this death or what sustains life. That's what they're missing. They're missing the Yahweh element. They're missing Yahweh, and this is why they're not having any success in life. The firmament includes not only the lower sky, or the atmosphere, that holds the waters and allows them to fall in drops to water the earth. It also includes the whole visible expanse that contains the stars, sun, and moon, which were placed there on the fourth day. So you see this here? Let's read that one more time. The firmament includes not only the lower sky or the lower atmosphere that holds the waters and allows them to fall into drops to water the earth. It also includes the whole visible expanse that contains the sun, the stars, sun, and moon, which were placed there on the fourth day. Now, years ago, I remember it was a video that was shown years ago, and in this video, it was a gentleman said that there's some things that the earth doesn't provide, or we don't get from the earth, that sustains life. And he said there's elements that come from certain stars. And I might be wrong in this because it's been a long time, but I think it was like some kind of a white dwarf star. It was something where there's something like, what was I can't remember the element, like fluorine. I don't remember what it was. It wasn't fluorine, but it was some element that only comes from this particular star that sustains the earth. Okay, and without it, he was saying without this particular thing that's sustained from, this star, there would be no life. And look at if we didn't have the sun, okay, we wouldn't have any life. So there's things that Yahweh created in the firmament that sustains life. Okay? So here, Genesis 1, verses 14 through 19, and Yahweh said, let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark the feasts, and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. Yahweh made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. And Yahweh set them in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to prepare light, to separate light from darkness. And Yahweh saw that he saw that it was right. So the evening and then the morning were the fourth day. Okay. So again, in this creation, when Yahweh's setting these things in order, knowing that if it's not done right, then there will be no life. Okay. It's a strategic plan so that we can live. Okay. And remember, that's what it's called to. It's a plan for life. It's not just something that's, he just threw out there. In Yachanan 1, verses 1 through 5, it shows that this is a plan. And in this plan is life. Okay. But in this plan, there's things that we have to do in order to live. Right? It's a detailed plan. Okay. Life is not an accident. Okay. Life is not an accident. It's not from an explosion. It's not from evolution. It's a plan. It's a design. Yahweh created it. Okay. So we can't forget that. We can't allow ourselves to be distracted by, the foolish thoughts and the foolish ideas of man. Yahweh said, I will make man in my image according to my likeness. Okay. And so if I'm going to make man, I have to create a place for them to live. I have to create, conditions so that they can learn how to be me. Okay. And so not only did he provide, food and clothing and shelter and these things, but he also gave us, emotions. He gave us a mind. He gave us all of these things. And so all of these things are used so that we can become like Yahweh, so that we can learn how to think. Remember, we were talking about this yesterday in one of the classes, Genesis 1:26, right? Where it says, I will make man in my image according to my likeness. Remember what the word likeness means? It means, the footnote shows that it means to consider, to compare, to think, to use similitudes. Okay, learn how to think like Yahweh. Learning how to think like Yahweh. Okay, because we're not robots. Okay, we're not. Yahweh gave us emotions. He gave us thoughts and says, look, I'm giving you these things. You're made subject to vanity. But if you think on these things, then you will grow. Okay, if you think on these things, if you eat these foods, it'll help you make right choices. To keep you from having a defiled mind. All of these creations, all of these microorganisms, they have a work to do. And if you take care of them, they'll take care of you. Okay? We're responsible for our own bodies. For one, we're responsible for what we put in. Learning how to govern a house of Yahweh, so to speak. Because remember, you are the house of Yahweh, right? So you have to govern and watch over what enters into the house. You have to govern that. And if you defile it, then we're cursed. And remember, curse causeless will not come. So continuing on here, the rain comes and drops. Why? Evidence of rain-making bacteria discovered in atmosphere and snow. Science Daily, February 28, 2008. Brent Krishner, LSU professor of biological sciences, in partnership with colleagues in Montana and France, recently found evidence that rain-making bacteria are widely distributed in the atmosphere. So February 28th, 2008, they recently found evidence of this. The prophetic word with the real cause of global warming came out when? Was it 05 or 06? 06. 2 years before they found evidence. Right? Did Pastor wait to 2010 to bring out what's already recorded in the scriptures? No, he brings it out, before they even have a clue. Okay? This is where we're at. We're in Yahweh's house, the creator of all of these things. Remember Yahweh, we just read it. Yahweh says, I am the creator of all flesh. Okay? You want to know the answers? Come and ask. Isn't that what he said? Ask where? Ask at Abel. Ask at Abel. Did he say ask at LSU? Absolutely not. Ask at Abel. These biological properties could factor heavily. Let me see here. Yeah, these biological properties could factor heavily into the precipitation cycle, affecting climate, agricultural productivity, and even global warming. Really? Microorganisms? These things might affect global warming? Okay. Christner and his colleagues published their results on February 29th in the journal Science. Christner's team examined precipitation from global locations and demonstrated that the most active ice nuclei, a substrate that enhances the formation of ice, are biological in origin. This is important because the formation of ice in clouds is required for snow and most rainfall. Dust and soot particles can serve as ice nuclei, but biological ice nuclei are capable of catalyzing freezing at much warmer temperatures. If present in clouds, biological ice nuclei may affect the processes that trigger precipitation. So they're starting to, see that, hey, there's actually life or microorganisms, that deal with rain and snow and the way that the way that the earth works. Okay, they're just now starting to understand, hey, look, this is how the earth works. There's life that actually have jobs that govern whether or not we're going to have rain or snow. They're just now getting this. And like Pastor said, you know where I got it? From the scriptures. Again, before 1880, when, what's that guy's name? Boltzmann Law came out. Continuing on here, it said biological precipitation, or the bioprecipitation cycle, as David Sands, Montana State University professor of plant science and plant pathology, calls it, basically is this: bacteria from little groups on the surface of plants. Okay, so that's what they're calling it. This bioprecipitation is bacteria from little groups on the surface of plants. Wind then sweeps the bacteria into the atmosphere, and ice crystals form around them. Water clumps on the crystals, making them bigger and bigger. The ice crystals turn into rain and fall to the ground. When precipitation occurs, then the bacteria have the opportunity to make it back down to the ground. If even one bacterium lands on a plant, it can multiply and form groups, thus causing the cycle to repeat itself. Okay, so all it takes is one bacteria to fall on a plant for this whole process to start up again. All it takes is one. Okay, but think about how things bad can get to where this cycle is interrupted or stopped. Okay, remember the Dust Bowl? I remember one of the men said, he said that his father told him the reason why we're having drought, he said, look at the ground. He said it's wrong side up. Okay, because of that greed, all of that tilling and plowing and things like that, there was nothing left. There was nothing left. So the rain cycle was interrupted because of greed. But then remember, once they stopped, remember the grass grew back and everything, then they had some rain, right? What occurred when they went back to plowing things up again the way that they did in the first Dust Bowl? Who remembers? No one remembers? Second Dust Bowl. Y'all knew that, right? No, you didn't. No, you knew because it was brought out here. But these are the things we have to remember, though. I mean, if we're training to govern, and to teach, we have to remember all of these things. We cannot forget the lessons. Remember, you have to teach what you've learned. These are the things we learned. But, I'm going to give you a little bit of leniency here because, we do forget things. And Pastor did say you're going to be amazed at what I've taught you. We've forgotten some things, but it's all going to come back to us. So right now, just hold on to the faith. Hold on to the every word of Yahweh and keep practicing these laws. But it's going to come back to us. We'll be able to draw on all of this information and be righteous teachers, righteous shepherds. All right? So continuing on here, we think if the bacteria couldn't cause ice to form, they couldn't get back down to the ground, Sand said. As long as it rains, the bacteria grow. The team's work is far-reaching. Sands and his colleagues have found the bacteria all over the world, including Montana, California, the eastern U.S., Australia, South Africa, Morocco, France, and Russia. These research findings could potentially supply knowledge that could help reduce drought from Montana to Africa, Sands said. Okay, so guess what? Because of the work that they're doing here, this research could potentially, or this knowledge could potentially stop the drought. Right. No, it won't. Okay? No, this knowledge won't. The only knowledge that's going to keep the droughts and to fix things is this knowledge of Yahweh. Okay, remember what it says, Proverbs 1:7? I don't have to turn to it, we know it. In Proverbs 1:7, it says, knowledge or wisdom is what? The reverence of Yahweh is the chief part, right? The reverence of Yahweh is the chief part of wisdom, of knowledge. Let's read it because I'm butchering it. Let's read it really quick. Here it is. Proverbs 1:7. The reverence of Yahweh is the beginning, the first requirement, the chief part of knowledge, which is wisdom. Only fools, those who are morally perverse, turning from what is right. What is right? What scripture? Psalms 33:4. The laws of Yahweh are right and all of his works are done in truth. So only those who turn from what is right or turn from Yahweh's laws, they despise wisdom and instruction. Okay, so knowledge, the reverence of Yahweh, keeping Yahweh's laws is the first part of knowledge. Understanding it, and then wisdom, doing what's right in the eyes of Yahweh. So this research isn't going to teach them anything. You know, it may show them how things work, but they're not going to understand it. They're not going to really understand how intricate life is. That only comes from Yahweh. Yahweh gives that understanding from his house, at his house. So here, continuing on, it says the concept of rainmaking bacteria isn't far-fetched. Cloud seeding with silver iodide of dry ice has been done for more than 60 years, in which they wouldn't have to do if the laws of Yahweh were being kept, because remember, the promise is, you know, you will have rain in its season if you keep these laws, right? You will have rain. Everything will do what it's supposed to do if you keep these laws. But now they have to seed the clouds so that it can rain because of sin. So anyway, it says here, many ski resorts use a commercially available freeze-dried preparation of ice nucleating bacteria to make snow when the temperature is just a few degrees below freezing. My colleague David Sands from Montana State University proposed the concept of bioprecipitation over 25 years ago, and few scientists took it seriously. But evidence is beginning to accumulate that supports this idea, said Krishner. But what makes this research more complicated is that most known ice nucleating bacteria are plant pathogens. These pathogens, which are basically germs, can cause freezing injury in plants, resulting in devastating economic effects and agricultural crop yields. As it is often the case with bacterial pathogens, other phases of their life cycle are frequently ignored because of the focused interest in their roles in plant or animal health, said Krishner. Okay, so they ignore these things. They ignore certain aspects of life. So transport through the atmosphere is a very efficient dissemination strategy, okay, which means to spread. Okay, dissemination means to spread abroad. So this is a very effective way to spread these things. So the ability of a pathogen to affect its precipitation from the atmosphere would be advantageous in finding new hosts. It is possible that the atmosphere represents one facet of the infection cycle, whereby the bacteria infects a plant, multiplies, is aerosolized into the atmosphere, and then delivered to a new plant through the atmospheric precipitation. So what did he actually say without saying it? Okay, what did he say here without saying it? That yes, STDs and all these other germs, diseases, and things like that is in the firmament. That's what he's saying here. He doesn't know that's what he's saying, but that's what he's saying. But Pastor said it. Okay, Pastor said it. And this is what they're starting to see. Like, look, you can get germs in the air. You got this stuff in the air in the firmament. You got this in the firmament. But they're still searching. But Pastor has already told us, look, these things are in the air. Okay? These STDs are in the air. Continuing on here, it says, the role that biological particles play in atmospheric processes have been largely overlooked. However, we have found biological ice nuclei in precipitation samples from Antarctica to Louisiana. These they're ubiquitous, okay, which means they're everywhere. Ubiquitous means everywhere. They're ubiquitous. Our results provide an impetus for atmospheric scientists to start thinking about the role these particles play in precipitation, says Krishner. So he says that it's through their studies that impetus means a driving force, or to motivate or inspire and encourage someone to do something. So he's saying that their research is they actually got people looking at this kind of stuff, but the truth is it's pastor sermons that actually got people looking at these things. Okay, they can say what they want to say, but they weren't bringing out this information until pastor brought these things out over nearly 12 years ago, probably longer than that. But I mean, he really concentrated our thoughts on these things, starting with that prophetic word. Continuing on, it says that this work is truly multidisciplinary, bringing the disciplines of ecology, microbiology, plant pathology, and climatology. Y'all didn't know you were studying all that in the house of Yahweh, did you? It represents a completely new avenue of research and clearly demonstrates that we are just beginning, at least they were honest, they're just beginning to understand the intricate interplay between the planet's climate and biosphere. Okay, they're just now starting to understand that. The role of bacteria in weather and weather events. The role of bacteria in weather events. Excuse me. It says New Orleans, Los Angeles. Researchers have discovered a high concentration of bacteria in the center of hailstones, suggesting that airborne microorganisms may be responsible for that and other weather events. It says here that bacteria have been found within the embryo, the first part of a hailstone to develop. The embryo is a snapshot of what was developed with the event that initiated growth of the hailstone, says Alexander McHard of Montana State University in Bozeman, who presented the research. McHard and his colleagues analyzed hailstones over 5 centimeters in diameter that were collected on the university campus after a storm in June of 2010. The large hailstones were separated into 4 layers, and the meltwater from each layer was analyzed. The number of culturable bacteria was found to be highest in the inner cores of the hailstone. In order for precipitation to occur, a nucleating particle must be present to allow for aggregation of water molecules, says McCall. There is growing evidence that these nuclei can be bacteria or other biological particles. McCall's research is part of a growing field of study focusing on bioprecipitation, a concept where bacteria may initiate rainfall and other forms of precipitation, including snow and hail. So they still don't know if microorganisms actually play a role or not. They're still trying to figure it out. Is there any doubt in the house of Yahweh? None. No doubt. The formation of ice in clouds, which is necessary for snow and most rainfall events, requires ice nuclei. Ice nuclei, or IN, particles that the ice crystals can grow around. Ice nucleating strains of P. syringae possesses a gene that encodes a protein in their outer membrane that binds water molecules in an ordered arrangement, providing a very efficient nucleating template that enhances ice crystal formation, says Krishner. So as we're reading this, let's not just think about how complicated it sounds, but it's very complicated. Okay? And that's the point. It's complicated. It didn't just occur. Okay? It's designed this way to provide a certain function. And if we don't know how to take care of it, then it's not going to be able to do its job. That's one of the main reasons why we need to meet with Yahweh for instructions. You have to understand that the Sabbath day is a blessing for us. Okay? It's not a problem for us. Okay? It's not to disrupt our normal flow of things or whatever. It's there so it can be a blessing for us so that we can understand how to live. I mean, it cannot even be over-explained. Continuing on here, it says here, aerosol cloud simulation molecules imply that high concentrations of biological ice nucleotides may influence the average concentration and size of the ice crystals in clouds. Horizontal cloud coverage in the free troposphere, precipitation levels at the ground, and even insulation of the earth from solar radiation. Okay, so he's showing here that these micro kingdoms have a lot of responsibility. Okay, they're guarding and keeping. They're doing their job. They're making sure that we're protected from things, that Yahweh says don't allow these things in. Okay, like a certain amount of radiation from the sun and different things like that. Okay, they have a job to do. Evidence for the distribution of biological IN in the atmosphere, coupled with the warm temperatures at which they function as IN, has implied that biological IN may play a role in Earth's hydrological cycle and radioactive balance, says Krishner. So again, it's like, man, these things do a lot more than what we first thought. They do a lot more than what we first thought. Okay, they don't just provide breath, clean air. No, they actually govern the planet. They actually govern the planet. In the Hebrew words describing the firmament, we find the English meanings compact mass or compact mass, prop and support, something solid, capable of bearing up the waters that the micro kingdoms accumulate in masses above, and having the heavenly bodies affixed to it as to a crystalline pavement. Notice they are fixed, stationary, but flexible. In 2 Samuel 22 verse 8, the King James Version, then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations of heaven moved and shook because he was wroth. We see here the foundations of heaven, or the firmament. We also see in the prophet's writings the compact mass, capable of bearing up the waters that Yahweh set laws for to guide in the accumulation of masses above. Okay? Fixed by law. Remember, fixed by law in creation on the second day. Notice again the underlined. Transforming the solar constant into the energy radiated by the sun, and thence into its effective temperature was impossible until the law that connects the temperature of a surface with the amount of heat radiated per second. The Stefan-Boltzmann law was established around 1880. So they understood this principle of how Yahweh says certain things in order. And it was like, oh, now that we understand that, now I can see this and this and this. But it wasn't until they understand that aspect, though. But it's a law that governs these things. Okay, the micro kingdoms are set by law to do a certain job. And this is what they're responsible for doing. Whatever it is, whether it's to collect rain, whether it's to keep certain things out of our firmament, out of the air in which we breathe, whatever their jobs is, Yahweh said, this is your job. And that's it. Okay? And they do their job. Okay? They do their job. They don't go beyond what they're supposed to do or anything. Okay? They're obedient to the law, to the instructions. It says again, remember, fixed by law, again speaking of the foundation of heaven, the firmament. Now compare the firmament in Yashub, or Job's lesson in astronomy. In Job 26:11, and this is in the Amplified Bible, the pillars of the heavens tremble and are astonished at his rebuke. Notice the pillars of the heavens, the firmament. Now read Job 26 verse 10 in the Amplified Bible. He has placed an enclosing limit, the horizon upon the waters at the boundary between light and darkness. Okay? And remember, they call these the forbidden lines. Remember that? We just read that a little bit ago. The forbidden lines of ionized atoms, iron and nickel, and other elements, which are almost impossible to produce in man's laboratory. So mankind can't produce a horizon? Oh, well, Yahweh can. Yahweh can. And he uses this for a reason, and it's set by law. Okay? So this is the boundary between light and darkness here. Now again, speaking of the firmament, and we're on page 57 at the top. Speaking of the firmament, coming from the Hebrew words showing the firmament having heavenly bodies affixed to it by boundaries or laws, please keep in mind that the workers, the micro kingdoms, are active families of workers, much like families or kingdoms of ants, yet much smaller, that were bound to do certain jobs in the firmament for the benefit of mankind. Now read Psalm 78 verse 23. Yet he commanded the skies above and opened the doors of heaven. He commanded the skies, or the firmament. The micro-kingdoms are bound by the authority of Yahweh. He made them in that manner. They are bound by law to obey Yahweh and now Yeshua. The winds, being part of the firmament, obey Yahweh and Yeshua, our great King and Messiah. And in Matthew verse 8, verses 26 and 27, it says, "But he said to them, Why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the wind and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, What kind of man is this, that the winds and the sea obey him?" Okay, now, when you look at that, there's two questions there. Okay? One, Yeshua's question. He said, "Why are you so fearful, O you of little faith?" Okay, y'all see the question mark there, right? Okay, and then the second question, these are the men with them, the apostles. They said, "What kind of man is this, that the winds should obey him? The winds and the sea obey him." So let's work our way from the bottom up here and answer these questions. So first, the winds and the sea are what? They're made up of what? Microorganisms, right? They're made up of microorganisms that obey Yahweh and now Yeshua. Okay? They obey the righteous whom Yahweh gives that authority to, right? Now, does microorganisms listen to sinners? No. Okay, so there's a lot of information in that right there. So what kind of a man is this? Well, if the microorganisms obey him, if the wind and the seas obey him, that eliminates a sinner, right? So he's not a sinner. He can't be a sinner if the winds and the sea obey him. And what is sin? The breaking of Yahweh's law. Okay, this is a man that kept Yahweh's law, and so the winds and the sea obey him because Yahweh gave him that authority. They listen to Yeshua. So this is what kind of man he is. A righteous man who's just like Yahweh. Okay, two scriptures real quick while I'm thinking about it. Romans 10:4. Romans 10:4. Okay, again, this is answering the question, what kind of a man is this? Okay, and think about it. This is the kind of man that we need to be, because remember, we're obligated to walk just like Yeshua, right? We're obligated to walk just like Yeshua. Romans 10:4, for Yeshua is the ultimate result of the keeping the law unto righteousness for everyone who believes. Okay, so Yeshua is the ultimate result of keeping the law of Yahweh. He's what we're going to become. Okay, he's like Yahweh. But, there's still certain things that, again, the rewards that Yahweh is going to bless him with later on. But his character is exactly like Yahweh's, to where he was able to give the command, and the wind and the seas obeyed him. Second scripture is in 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy 1:5. It's on page 933. Okay, again, what kind of a man is this? Now, the ultimate result of the law is love out of a pure heart, a clear conscience, an unfeigned or a genuine faith. Okay? The ultimate result of the law is love out of a pure heart. So the ultimate result of the best thing that's going to occur to us is having love out of a pure heart. This is from keeping the law. You're going to have this pure love, right? This pure love. So Yeshua said the two greatest commandments were what? Praise Yahweh. I know the rest of y'all wanted to say it, but couldn't speak as fast. That's fine. So love Yahweh with all your heart, soul, might, and strength. And he said the second one is just as important. It's just as great. Okay? The first one was the greatest, but the second one is just as great. Love your brother as yourself. Okay? These are the two greatest commandments. And Yeshua was the ultimate result of the keeping of these two laws. It says these two laws, all of the rest of the laws and the prophecies depend upon these two laws. All of our understanding, all of our behavior, everything is based on those two laws, loving Yahweh and loving your brother. Okay? So this was the kind of man that Yeshua was, or is, okay? Now, the other question was, why are you so fearful? Oh, you of little faith. Now, we can approach that in several different ways, but I'm going to approach it from this direction here. Okay, because again, love out of a pure heart and an unfeigned faith, a genuine faith, is what kind of a man Yeshua was. And that's the ultimate result of the keeping of Yahweh's law. Now, if you look at, remember what the faith is, right? Remember, Pastor said that the faith is living by the every word of Yahweh. That's one of the definitions of the faith. Remember that? Living by the every word of Yahweh. That's the faith. So when you live by the every word of Yahweh, you start learning how to keep these laws, okay? Learning how to love Yahweh with all your heart, soul, and might, and learning how to love your brother. So why are you fearful? Look at 1 Yachanah chapter 4, okay? 1 Yachanah chapter 4, look at verse 18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has torment, and he who has fear is not made perfect in love. Okay, so look at chapter 5, verses 2 and 3. By this we know that we love the children of Yahweh when we love Yahweh by keeping his laws. For this is the love of Yahweh, that we keep his law, and his laws are not grievous. So again, faith, living by the every word of Yahweh. Okay, these are the teachings. Love Yahweh, love your brother. This is true love. But why are you fearful? Why are you fearful? True love casts out all fear. Love Yahweh, love your brother. Okay, so why did I say all of that? Well, remember one of the examples when the two sons, Zabdia's sons, the question to Yeshua was, can they be at your right hand and your left hand side? And remember what occurred with the other 10 men, the other 10 apostles? The scriptures show they became indignant. Okay, because of this, because one wanted to be greater than the other one, right? Remember that attitude early on with these men? Okay, they became angry, and that's what that word indignant means. But earlier examples in the scripture says, why are you angry, Cain? Why are you angry? If you do righteousness, will you not be accepted? And then he murdered his brother. But this anger, this lack of true love for our brother is a lack of faith. It's a lack of actually keeping the laws of Yahweh, which will not allow us to be able to have authority over life, the microorganisms. So this is what he's saying. Why are you fearful? It's a little bit of wind. If you were righteous, you'd be able to say, cease and be still. But I'm not done with y'all yet. This is what he's telling them. This is what we're being told right now. Okay, our love isn't made perfect yet. Remember Philippians 1:6, Yahweh will finish this work that he started in us. Then we will be able to walk on water like Yeshua did. Remember Kepha was walking on, hey, call to me, teacher, and I can do it. Come on, Kepha. Kepha, why did you doubt? What's wrong, Kepha? Well, my love's not made perfect yet. I still got problems with so-and-so and so-and-so. Well, we can work on that. Okay? We will make your love perfect, Kepha. Okay? And this is the promise. Yahweh's going to help us, and our love's going to be perfect, and we're going to have this authority to make sure there's peace, joy, and abundant living. Okay? And the microorganisms will listen to the righteous. Okay? And so that's why I went through all of that, because there's a lot of lessons in here, and we don't want to be like the scientists, kind of understanding how things work, but then can't do anything about it. Okay? Can't stop a tornado, can't stop a tidal wave, can't do anything. Just fear and cower for your life. Okay? True love, the keeping of Yahweh's laws, understanding how Yahweh works, will eliminate all of that garbage. There won't be a need for tidal waves and tornadoes, if everyone was keeping Yahweh's law. What would create these natural disasters, as they call it? That's what causes it, yeah. But if we didn't sin, would we still have those things? No, it wouldn't come down 254. There would be no need to tear up 254. Remember, a curse causeless will not come. Okay? There would be no need for a volcano to just spring up in the middle of the 44 and just burn up everything. It's like, man, these things won't occur when there's faithfulness, when there's righteousness. Okay, so continuing on here. Micro kingdoms in the firmament. The firmament is made up of micro kingdoms, each one doing its job in the atmosphere to keep the whole firmament healthy for mankind. We know that the micro kingdoms are alive. Well, over here, it's far-fetched. They're still trying to figure out what's going on, but it says, we know that the micro kingdoms are alive. So who is Pastor talking about here? Us, right, the house of Yahweh. We know that the micro kingdoms are alive. They breed and multiply. These microorganisms continually adjust the firmament to keep it perfect for mankind. And they're working hard, man. Okay, they're working hard. Remember, just a few weeks ago, we were covering, earlier in this book, it might have been it was a law class, I'm sorry. It was one of Pastor's older sermons, where he said, he was talking about the seventh year, letting the earth rest. He said, let's go above and beyond to let the earth rest this year, because we're going to be using these microorganisms and we're going to be making them work really hard. So let's give them, let's go beyond what the law says and help them rest up. Because pretty soon here they're going to be resurrecting the dead. I mean, the earth is going to be destroyed. Okay? It's going to be burnt up. It's already filled with sickness and disease. Everything is defiled. Okay? And we're going to be using these microorganisms, these micro kingdoms, to restore the earth to its original glory. Okay? That's a lot of work. Okay? And Pastor's seen this. He understands this. And that's why I said, look, let's let them rest. Let's let them rest. Okay? That wisdom comes from Yahweh. Did the world let the land rest? Not at all. Not at all. They continue to find ways to bring forth death. And that's what Yahweh said in the Proverbs. He who hates me, wisdom, loves death. They love death. The biggest moneymaker is war. War. Remember what Pastor said, Bawa Jane said to him? He's like, this is, how many, I can't remember, multi-billion-dollar a year operation. He's like, you're not going to be able to shut this down. How much? 800 billion? Well, it's a lot of money. All right. We got different numbers coming out. It's a lot of money. Billions, maybe even trillions of dollars. It's a lot of money. And that's what they're looking for. It's profit. It's greed. It's not Yahweh's character. And that's what Pastor said. These microorganisms, nuclear power, that's as far as they're going to get. Yahweh's power goes far beyond that. And what Yahweh uses that energy for sustains life. Not destroy it. So continuing on here, let's see. The problem arises when viruses invade the microkingdoms and rape and mutate the microorganisms to the point that the rain-causing bacteria cannot cause the rain. And the microkingdoms that filter the sun's rays are no longer able to function properly. Then drought is caused. Then global warming takes place. The cause of STD viruses is man. Therefore, global warming and drought are man-made. Wow. That's a pretty bold statement, isn't it? Pretty bold statement. Global warming, it's man-made. They're still arguing over that. Okay? But they're saying, it's your carbon footprint. Get you an electric hybrid. Don't. Remember Pastor making all of these jokes? He was like, don't use wood-burning stoves because the earth can't handle, wood burning. It can't handle these things. No, the firmament is designed to handle these things. What it can handle is STDs in the firmament that don't belong there, okay, which are caused by man. It can't handle these things. And now these microorganisms, it says here, now they rape and mutate. They're doing the same things that man is doing. Okay, this sickness, this confusion has spread from man to this other life, to these microorganisms. Okay, so now they can't even do their job to take care of us. As we've just read here, it was created and established by law to take care of man. But we messed it up. All right, remember, let me read this scripture real quick before I close here. I got a little time left. A little bit of time. So in Genesis 3. In Genesis 3, it says here, verse 11. Verse 11. So now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the soil, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall be a fugitive, and you will be ever searching for peace on the earth. Okay, you'll be ever searching for peace on the earth. Now, the reason that I wanted to read that is because, again, the microorganisms, they do not listen to sinners. Okay, they only listen to the righteous. And so Yahweh was showing here that, look, the earth isn't going to listen to you. It's not going to work with you. You're going to try to bring forth the things that are created in the food, the vitamins, the minerals. You're pouring, you're killing people. The blood is spilling in there. You're creating STDs. You're not going to get the life-giving elements from the earth anymore. You're not going to get that. What you're going to get is continual war, the cycle of death. Okay, this is what you're going to ever be searching for peace. Okay, peace between who? Well, not just mankind, but that unity that mankind once had with the earth, where when we worked the earth yielded its strength. Okay, they're still searching for this peace. Okay, and GMO, trying to modify the food. There's no unity in that, because now they're causing even more harm. Okay? Trying to figure out how to get the strength from the earth. Well, now here, just take this pill. Take this pill. Take that pill. If you plant a pill, is it going to grow into a tree? You're going to have like an aspirin tree in your backyard? There's no life-giving elements in that. Okay? Yahweh created life, and it's in the seeds. That's why we have to know how to take care of these things so that we can continue to bring forth life. Okay? Because if there's no more apples or greens or anything like that, and all we're doing is producing pills in the factory, Walmart is just filled with different types of pills, right? No bread, no nothing, right? Just pills. I wonder how long we'll last then. You know, what is our selection? It's like 10 rows of pills. Oh, this is new. Because they're always coming up with new stuff. When you could have ate an apple. Could have ate an apple. Or an orange or something. Man, I'm going over. I'm sorry. No, I'm not. I'm not sorry. But I'm sorry. So we'll stop there on page 57. The Great Khan to pick up next week. He'll pick up on page 57 next week. Man, Yahweh bless you.